All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Daf Ayin Beis Meseches Pesachim. So we left off yesterday with a Mishnah. We're actually going back and discussing the Mishnah. So one of the cases of the Mishnah was a person. The general case is that a person went ahead, and we know that the Korban Pesach overrides Shabbos. Let's say they did the Korban Pesach l'shem for a shlamim. So he said, the Mishnah said, right? Going back to the Mishnah, he said he's chai v'chatas. He's chai v'chatas in such a case because he did not fulfill a mitzvah, and therefore he is obligated to go ahead and bring a chatas. So says the Gemara. So b'mayas kina. So as top of the page on Ayin Beis Amud Aleph, first word, first line. B'mayas kina. So if we're talking about a case where the person was mistaken and he thought he was actually right, that he was that which the animal he had, he thought was, let's say, a shlamim and something else, right? It was a shlamim, and he was shechting out l'shem shlamim. So shmamina akira b'tos havi akira. So let's learn from here, which is there's a question in the Gemara which the Gemara does not in another area, right? Let's learn from here that if one does something b'tos, right, mistakenly, in other words, he didn't realize it was his Korban Pesach, it was right, so he thought it was another animal. He brought it for the other sake of the animal. That we see that such a mistake is possible to go ahead and uproot it, right? That is considered to be a proper akira, to passel it, right? So Gemara says, so we don't want to go ahead and basically establish a machloikas to be a clear pashut answer, right? Because then we could just say, well, why don't that Gemara just bring our case here to say that it works? Obviously, it's a shilah, it's not the pshat here. So Ella, ba'ikir. Rather, we're not talking about a person who was toya. He knew it was his Korban Pesach, but he thought you can go ahead and bring your Korban Pesach on Erev Shabbos, right? Erev Pesach, on Shabbos, Erev Pesach, as a shlamim, if you chose to. So we're talking about a case of Iker. He did it knowingly. So Ema Seifa. Let's look at the Seifa. The next case of our mission. The next case of our mission says, other karbanos that he shechted l'shem Pesach. So he takes his shlamim and he goes that he shechts it for his Korban Pesach, right? On that Shabbos. So if that animal is not fit, let's say it's a calf, right? We know that the animal should only be brought from, say, a sheep or a goat. Let's say it's a calf, right? So which is not a sheep or a goat, right? It's from the cow family. So, and if it's an animal which is fit, then Rabbi Eliezer says you're chai v'chatas because you didn't do it. You didn't do a mitzvah, and therefore you're chai to bring a chatas. And Rabbi Shua pater, right? Let's remember Rabbi Shua shita because we're going to be discussing it all day today. Rabbi Shua says you're pater. Why? Because since you were performing a mitzvah, at least you're bringing a shlamim, right? That you're isek b'mitzvah, therefore you're pater. Now, if we're talking about where he willingly does it, mali roin, mali ishen roin. If he willingly does it, goes ahead and changes it, it's not a mitzvah. So what does it make a difference whether the animal is fit or not, right? He should be chayiv. So elo pshita, rather the seifa, the second case of right, when he takes a shlamim and he does l'shem Korban Pesach on Shabbos, that's obvious. We're talking about b'toya when that is done mistakenly. So the Gemara says reisha ba'ikir. So the first part of the Mishnah is when he does it mistakenly. Reisha ba'ikir when he does it purposely. The seifa b'toya, and the seifa is the case of where he does it mistakenly. So says Rabbi Avin, yes, that's the case. Reisha ba'ikir v'seifa b'toya. Yes, the reisha and seifa are dealing in two different cases. In the reisha, he's doing it knowingly, right? Knowingly that this is my Korban Pesach, and nevertheless he does l'shem shlamim. Right? In the case of Seifa, he doesn't realize that his shlamim, right, was not his Korban Pesach, and therefore it makes a difference whether it was a type of animal which is kosher the Korban Pesach or not. And speaking of this case, Ashke Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef Rabbi Avo Dahavika Buchsed Inshi. So one time, Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef found Rabbi Avo. He was standing amongst the people. Amar lei, Masnis and Mai. How do you understand the Mishnah? Amar lei, Reish Ba'ikir v'Seifa B'Toya. Just like we explained, the Reish is talking about where he does it knowingly. He knows it was his Korban Pesach, but he thought he was allowed to go ahead and bring it as a shlamim. And the Seifa is talking about a case of B'Toya. He actually thought that this that this shlamim was his Korban Pesach. And that was the case. And Tana, Minei, Arba, and Zimni, V'donle, Command, Demandcha, Bekise. And right, he taught him 40 times. So he remembered like a person in his purse, right? A person has in his purse, it's secure. Therefore, this limud was secure in his head. Now, Tana. So let's look at it. The Mishnah says, Omar Rebbe Eliezer. This is the next line of the Mishnah. It says over there, Omar Rebbe Eliezer, Maim Pesach Shemot Lishmo, Kshina Shemo Chayiv. By Korban Pesach, we know if a person wants to go ahead and bring his Korban Pesach, l'shem Korban Pesach on Shabbos is mutter. It's a mitzvah, right? Kashina Shemo Chayiv. But if he goes ahead and he brings it as a shlamim, he's chayiv. So zvachim shein asur lishman. So a shlamim on Shabbos, right, which is usher to go ahead and even bring as a shlamim, because shina sheman ain't a din sheyachayiv. Obviously, if he goes ahead and he changes it, right, which you think would be a wrong thing, right, certainly he should be chayiv for bringing shechting this animal on Shabbos. Now, Vim Isa. Now, if you're saying, like we just said, that the Reish and Sefer are talking about two different cases, Vim Isa ha'ladami. The Reish would be like, give a Sefer b'toya. If that's the case, that the Reish is talking about a case of where he's ba'oker, he's doing it purposely, and the Sefer is talking about where he's not doing it purposely. So the whole logic of the question falls out, because the whole logic of the question was comparing the case of the Karban Pesach doing it as a shlamim, or a shlamim doing it as the Karban Pesach. But if one case is talking about when he does it knowingly, and the other case is not knowingly, so then how could you go ahead and ask that kasha? And Rabbi Yezer, according to Rabbi Yezer, it's not a kasha because Rabbi Yezer always says he's chayiv. So the Rabbi Shua, the shanile lishni lehachi. But according to Rabbi Shua, right, who was asked upon him, Rabbi Shua says in the case of another karban who's done the shame Pesach, right, it would be pater. So why does Rabbi Shua not answer that? It's talking about two different cases. Don't ask me that case that you should be chayiv in that case. Just say it's two different cases. One is a case of Taya, one is a case of Eiker. So my answer is, Haki Kamar Lei. This is what Rabbi Shua says to me. The Didi, Ladami, according to me, it doesn't make a difference. Why? Because Reish Ba'Eiker v'Sefer B'Taya. It's two different cases. You can't compare the case of the Reish and the Sefer, because one is talking about Oker, one is talking about what he knowingly does, and the other time he mistakenly does it. However, Ladidchab, according to you, lo, you can't do it. If we're talking about a Karban Pesach, right, that you go ahead and you change, right, you change it from the Karban Pesach, let's say, to a shlamim, the davar aser, right, which is you can't bring on Shabbos. So tamar bezvachim shina shemal the davar mutter, right? What will you say by the shlamim? You're trying to do it as the Karban Pesach. So maybe since you're trying to do it as the Karban Pesach, maybe that's a svara to say that you're putter. So therefore, he doesn't go with that logic, even though enachanami, he could have just deflected the question. But he says, even according to your logic, maybe it's different, because the lemaisa, if he takes a shlamim and brings it as a Karban Pesach, maybe you think he's doing a mitzvah, and therefore he should be pater. So fine. So that was that case. Period. Now the next case of the Mishnah says, Amar lo Rebbe Eliezer. Rebbe Eliezer says back to Rebbe Shua. Now remember, let's just go back for a second. Rebbe Eliezer says you're chayiv bring a chatas if you go ahead and you bring another karban, right, as a Pesach, right? Rebbe Shua says you're pater because you're doing a mitzvah. So Rebbe Shua says he has a svara, you're pater doing a mitzvah. Now, so Rabbi Eliezer says to Rabbi Shua, I'll show you something which is a mitzvah on that day, and you're still chayiv. So let's look at, let's say, a communal karban, such as the tamid. So they should disprove it. When they go ahead and they bring the karban tamid in the morning of Shabbos, it's mutter, right? It's a mitzvah. But if someone goes ahead afterwards and wants to go ahead and bring a karban tamid, right, he's chayiv, right? He can't do it on Shabbos, right? Can't do it in the morning, but he can't do, right? He's no good. So you see you're chayiv, even though it's a mitzvah on that day, right? It's a mitzvah that day to bring the tamid. So nevertheless, if one brings his own tamid on that day, he's chayiv. So same thing with Karban Pesach, it should be chayiv. So when it comes to the tamid, there's only one that's brought. So if you go ahead and bring another one afterwards, you're not doing a mitzvah at all. That's why you're chayiv in that case. But the case of Karban Pesach, right? There is no end to the amount of Karban Pesach, right? There's no finite amount to bring. So therefore, it potentially could have been a mitzvah, and that's why you're pater according to Rabbi Shua. Now, lemeimra to go heicha these like kitzvah mechayiv the Rabbi Shua. So whatever is a set amount, Rabbi Shua says chayiv. So let's look at this case. Let's say you have a case of there's two babies, right? Which, in other words, there's going to be a case of there's a certain amount of bris milah you have to give, i.e., it's going to be two. Utanan, we learn in the Mishnah, you have two babies in front of you. Now, one was born last Shabbos, and one was born last Sunday. Okay, so when it comes to Shabbos, okay, one of them is on his 8th day, and the other one is on his 7th day, i.e., no mitzvah. Okay, now, so and you go ahead and you mistakenly take the wrong baby, and you give the baby on day 7 a bris milah on Shabbos. Chayiv, he is chayiv in such a case, right? He is chayiv in such a case because he didn't do a mitzvah. He circumcised the baby on the 7th day, right? And therefore he violated Shabbos. So echel amul b'erev Shabbos, but however, let's say a case like this: echel amul b'erev Shabbos, echel amul b'Shabbos. Let's say a baby was born last Friday, and a baby was born last Shabbos. And he forgot to went ahead and he didn't do anything on Friday, and on Saturday he gave a bris milah on the baby. For him it was day 9, right? So normally it's not Doicha Shabbos. Rabbi Shua b'chai v'chatas, and Rabbi Yeshua poiter. Rabbi Shua says in this case you're putter. Why? You did a mitzvah. Now wait, a baby's supposed to be circumcised only on the 8th day, right? You just did it on 9th day, right? So you went beyond the set time. The set time was there. So why is that any different than Tamid? So I'm Rabbi Ami Hachmaiskinan Kagoin Shakide Mumela Shel Erev Shabbos b'Shabbos. What happened? He went ahead and he gave a bris milah, right? The one from Friday on Shabbos, the Shabbos the Tarde. So since when he went ahead and gave the bris milah for the one on, so the one from Erev Shabbos, so therefore he still had a mitzvah in front of him. Since he still had a mitzvah in front of him, right? So therefore he was considered to be tarid b'mitzvah, right? He had to go ahead and still circumcise the baby for day 8, and therefore since he was tarid b'mitzvah, right? That's the reason why he's pater. But however, in the case of the Korban Tzibur, once they went ahead and offered the Korban Tamid, there is no mitzvah lingering around. If there is no mitzvah lingering around, then you're chayiv because you were not preoccupied, right, for doing a mitzvah. So therefore, you can't compare to the case of the baby. So in the case of the baby, you're pater because lamaisa you still had a mitzvah in front of you. In the case of the tamid, right, a person wants to go ahead and bring his own tamid after the tamid was already brought, therefore he's chayiv for violating Shabbos. Now, ihachi, if that's the case, let's look at Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says in our Mishnah, he has a more extreme, right, shita than even Rabbi Yeshua, right, in terms of saying pater. Rabbi Meir, if one goes ahead and brings the korban tzibur, right, after the korban tzibur brought, and he wants to bring his own, as let's say as a tamid, right, he is still pater. He's not chayiv. So Achal got the kadam v'shachtinu le'emor tzibur b'reisha. And even you're going to say, even if they already brought the korban tzibur, right, he's still pater. V'atani Reb Chia taught so May Avel Arif. I guess that's I guess he that was his name, right? So I'm take it out, right? It was a hey. All right, it's a Gerson Marshall. Okay, fine. So he says, "V'atani Reb Chia." So Amar Rabbi Meir, Leinechlu Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua Al Shayu Shtei Tinoikos Echel Amul B'Erev Shabbos, Echel Amul B'Shabbos. Right? They don't argue in a case of Friday and the Saturday baby, where it was day 8 and day 9. The Shafach Chamal is Shel Erev Shabbos B'Shabbos, and they forgot. They went ahead and gave the bris milah of the one on Erev Shabbos, right? On Shabbos, the Chayiv. In that case, it's Chayiv because over there they already gave the bris milah to the other baby, and therefore, in such a case, since there was no mitzvah to perform, and therefore he gave the bris milah for day 9. So the Chayiv, so Amal Nechlaku, what do they argue? Al Shayilo Shtei Tinoikos. When there were 2. So in that case, he says everyone agrees they're chayiv. So we're going to come back to that case. And so what do they argue about? It was a Saturday and Sunday babies. The shachach l'mal is shel achar haShabbos b'Shabbos. And they went ahead and took the Sunday baby and gave him a bris milah on day 7. The Rabbi Eliezer chayiv b'chatas. Rabbi Eliezer is chayiv b'chatas. Rabbi Shua pater, and Rabbi Shua says pater in this case. Now, if you look in the first case, that how can Rabbi Yeshua, right? How can Rabbi Meir say that if one is sheikh b'tzibur, if he agrees in this case, right? If the mitzvah is already done, right? Everyone says chayiv. But why would he say in our Mishnah if the tamid was already brought and he goes and he brings another tamid, then he's pater? In the first case, right? When the mitzvah was already done, right? He says everyone agrees the chayiv. The Tisba, does this make sense? Understand the brisa this way. So Mahas and Love Mitzvah Pater Rabbi Yeshua. So Heicha the Kavod Mitzvah. So he's over there. There was no mitzvah, right? There was no mitzvah because the baby wasn't. He was only 7 days. Heicha the Kavod Mitzvah Mechayim, right? But he would say, in other words, if he's Pater in a case of where he didn't do a mitzvah, right? That doesn't. In other words, if he's not doing a mitzvah and he's pater, so you're saying if he's doing a mitzvah, he's chayiv. That doesn't make any sense. So your understanding of that brisa is obviously mistaken because that doesn't make any sense. It should be the opposite. If you're doing a mitzvah, that's the reason to pater. But otherwise, you'd be chayiv. So Amri Debei Rabbi Yanai Reisha Kegoin Shekadam Umal Shel Shabbos Be'erev Shabbos. What's the case when he went ahead and he took and gave a bris milah of the one who was born on Shabbos, and Erev Shabbos, he gave him on a bris milah on day 7 of him on Friday, and therefore Shlo the Shabbos Litzchos. And therefore, in this case, turn the page on the top of Ayin Beis and Beis, and therefore, in this case, Shabbos, right, was not permitted to go ahead and be doicha. In other words, what happens? Since he went already gave a bris milah, right, for the baby that was supposed to be day 8 on Saturday, and he gave a bris milah on Friday. Therefore, this Shabbos was no longer fit to be violated, or to give a bris milah. And therefore, since he gives a bris milah on this Shabbos, that's the reason why it's chayiv. However, if it's safe in the Shabbos Litzchos, that's slow. But in the case of the Seifa, right, where there was a baby, right, the Sunday baby, and he accidentally gave the Sunday baby on Saturday, day 7, but there was still a baby that for him was 8th day who didn't have a bris milah yet, and therefore Shabbos was allowed to be violated. So since he did with the wrong one, it was okay. But over there, Reb Meir learns that as long as the Shabbos was supposed to be mechal through bris milah, and he gave the wrong baby the one, that's still patur. However, hachab in our case, right? In our case, right, Shabbos is allowed to go ahead and be violated, right, by the korban tzibur, right, by the tamid in the morning. So therefore, when you go ahead and bring your own tamid, since this Shabbos was supposed to be violated, right, therefore, when I go ahead and bring a tamid afterwards, or I bring my own korban tzibur, therefore I am patur. So that's Reb Meir. Reb Meir holds that since we look at the Shabbos, whether it was supposed to be violated or not.
So what happened to that rule of if a mitzvah is lingering around?
So it's a different svara according to Reb Meir. So Reb Meir doesn't hold that. This is Reb Meir. So that was according to Rabbi Yeshua, right? So that was according to Rabbi Yeshua in terms of if he was preoccupied. We're soon going to find that very soon. But you're right. But according to Reb Meir, this svara of Reb Meir, his whole thing is if that Shabbos was supposed to be violated, then if me thinking I was doing a mitzvah or doing something of that nature, I would be patur. So I'm Rav Ashi, Rav Kana. So why should we be chayiv, right? This Shabbos, I'm sure somewhere in Chicago, somewhere in the country, somewhere in the world, right? There's a baby supposed to have his bris milah today, so therefore Shabbos is supposed to be daicha. So my answer, I'm the gabi hayid gavra mi as lo regarding the Shabbos, we'll say that. He wasn't supposed to be mechalo the Shabbos, or he wasn't supposed to override the Shabbos with giving the bris milah in this case. Fine. 2 dots. All right. Now we can take a step back, put our brains to restart. Now the quote from the Mishnah says, still going the same sugya. V'shar kol hazvachim sheshachtan l'shum Pesach. So we quoted before any other karbanos that were shechted l'shum Pesach. Right. You take your animal, let's say it was a shlomim, and you go ahead and we say it was a case of where he forgot. And he says, okay, this is my Korban Pesach. If that animal, let's say, was not fit to be a Korban Pesach, it was a calf, right? Or it was female, or it was too old. Then he's chayiv, because you can't even confuse that with doing the mitzvah. However, if it was fit for the mitzvah, Rabbi Yezra chayiv chatas. Rabbi Yezra says chayiv chatas because l'maisa you didn't do the mitzvah, and Rabbi Shua pites there because you're doing the mitzvah, or because you were preoccupied with doing a mitzvah. It's still a good kosher korban. Now, Man Tana the Shana Bein Ruin the Shana Ruin, who is the Tana who differentiated between whether an animal is fit or not? That is Rabbi Shimon. The Tana in a brisa. So the Tana Kama, who's not going to be Rabbi Shimon, will disagree. Echad is v'chem haruin, echad is v'chem shena ruin. Whether an animal is fit or it's not fit, v'chein hasheicha the shena tzibur, or one who goes ahead and brings his own korban tzibur after the tzibur already does it. Such a case is patur, right? He's patur, even though he didn't do a mitzvah there, he's considered sort of doing a mitzvah, and therefore he's patur divrei Rabbi Meir. That's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Shimon says, Rabbi Shimon, no, that is to extreme. Right? They don't argue if an animal is not fit. Everyone agrees shechayiv. If it's not fit, the animal is a calf, it's a cow, it's not a sheep, right? So you're chayiv. You're not. That's not the Korban Pesach. You're chayiv. Alma nechlaku. What do they argue? Al ru'in. On something that potentially could have been fit, had it been designated as a Korban Pesach. Rabbi Yezra and Rabbi Shua says pater. Now, what's the reason? Amar Rabbi Elazar, Paiter Rabbi Meir afilu egel shel zivchei shlam shachol l'shem Pesach. Says Rabbi Elazar. Rabbi Meir would even say a calf, right, that was set aside as a shlamim he would be pater if he shechel l'shem Korban Pesach. Obviously, wouldn't be Yotzei his mitzvah Korban Pesach, but he'd be pater for being a chatas for violating Shabbos. Now, Amar le Rabbi Zeir le Rabbi Bibi. I've Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Maidaya Rabbi Meir b'Bali Mumen. Well, what do you mean? Didn't we see that Rabbi Meir would agree that an animal was a Baal Mum? An animal had a known blemish, right? It couldn't be offered, and he offers that as his Karban Pesach, he be chayiv. So why is that any difference than a calf, right? There is no bigger mum blemish in your Karban Pesach if it's a wrong species of animal, right? So I'm late, but Bali Mumin like Tarid Behu. In a case of once an animal is a Baal Mum, he's not preoccupied with it. It's not his obligation to bring as a korban. However, high Tarid Behu, but this animal, it's a kosher korban, happens to be a calf, so therefore he's very preoccupied with it, and therefore if he mistakenly brings as a Karban Pesach, he is patur. So therefore there's an excuse, it's different. So Boy Minei, Rav Mirav Nachman, what about Chulin l'Shem Pesach? Let's say a person took an animal, he never designated as a Karban Pesach, and he brought, it was Chulin, it was a rather regular mundane animal, l'Shem Pesach. So Mali Amar Rameir, what did Rameir say in that case? So Rameir, Poiter Haya Rameir Afilu Chulin l'Shem Pesach. He would say it's patur in such a case. What do you mean? How could he say an animal which is chulin is patur? Right? He paters in bali mumen. Since the animal is not right in that case, that you would be chayiv for bal mum, right? Because it's not fit. So to an animal which is chulin is not fit. So bali mumen loy mechlafi hani mechlafi. Why? Because a bal mum, you're not going to go ahead and mistaken it for a kosher korban. But an animal which is just chulin, a regular animal that you never designate for any korban, you couldn't be mistaken it. So therefore, if you accidentally brought it, that's why you be patur according to Meir. The time there Meir mishum the mechlafi lo lichafi, and the reason is according to Meir because whether or not you're going to accidentally mistake it with another animal. Alma. What do you mean? The case of the calf, right? You're never going to go ahead and mistake a calf, right, for a sheep, right? You might mistaken, right, a case of your chulin sheep for your hektish sheep, but you'll never mistaken your calf for your sheep, right? So he says in the end, Lamais like this: Tarid afagavdol michlef afagavdol tarid. Whether or not he's preoccupied, and even though he won't switch it with something else, right? He won't mistake it for another animal, or he would mistake it with another animal, but he's not preoccupied with a mitzvah. Both those cases, he is patur for. Lachlufe balimumen, to exclude a balimumen, exclude a balimumen, which he's not preoccupied with the mitzvah because he knows he doesn't do a mitzvah, and also he doesn't have a mitzvah, and also he won't confuse with another animal because he has a clear blemish on it, and therefore. That's the reason. If he goes ahead and shechs that animal, he would be chayiv in such a case. So Yasiv, Rabbi Zeir, Rabbi Shmuel Bar, Rabbi Yitzchak. So Rabbi Zeir and Rabbi Shmuel Bar, Rabbi Yitzchak, equal the Rabbi Shmuel Bar, Rabbi Yitzchak. The Yasiv Karmen, they said, Amar Rabbi Shimon Lakish, Nischalef loy shipud shel neisar b'shipud shel tzli v'achlu chayiv. So he said halacha, if one has a piece of neisar, right? And a spit that was roasted of neisar, a food that was left over to the next day, you're supposed to go ahead and destroy neisar. He forgot, he didn't do it, whatever it was, he didn't destroy it, and he eats it, chayiv. Right? He thought it was Korban Pesach, he eats it, he's chayiv. Rabbi Yochanan Omar, ishto nido bal chayiv. He says similarly, right? A person, right, who has relations with his wife, who is a nido, right? He is chayiv. Right? He thought, once again, the first one, he thought he was doing a mitzvah, right? Even Korban Pesach, it was nicer. Similarly, says Rabbi Yochanan, if his wife was a nida, thought it was b'shas onav, the time when they were supposed to have relations, a mitzvah, to be mesameach his wife, right? He is chayiv. Also, yevimta nida bal, let's say he was bal yevama, right? The one is a brother died without any children. He takes his wife in order to take his wife, and the marriage is done through bia, right? Through relations. So he has that mitzvah's bia with her. Patur. That case is patur because he's doing an actual mitzvah. Now we got to see what's the reason over there why he's patur in the case of Yavama, but the case of Neisar is chayiv. In the case of Ishta Nida also chayiv. And Igad Amri, some say, what was the version? Some say Kol Shekain Bahim Chayiv to lost a mitzvah. Certainly in the case of Neisar, he's chayiv because he didn't do a mitzvah. And East Amri, some say no, Bahi patur. That case he is patur. Why is that? My time, Hasam hu the Havile Lishluye. But others would say no. In the case of Ishtanida, right, that he would be chayiv for. Why? Because he should have asked his wife. But when it comes to Naisar, you can't ask the piece of meat. So since he can't ask the piece of meat, so therefore you're patur in such a case. Rabbi Yochanan, if that's the case, Why? I understand in the case of the Yavama, so let him go ahead and ask the Yavama. Since he didn't ask her and she was a Nida, Lamaisa, he should be Chayiv. So he says, the Kavin mitzvah, so you should not be Kavin mitzvah. So in the case, the Yavam will say it was a mitzvah. So I, with his wife, was also a mitzvah for mitzvah peruvu. So Bishta Muberes, so his wife was pregnant. There's a mitzvah to be Misameach his wife. Right? It wasn't during the time to go ahead and fulfill his onah. He already fulfilled his onah. The Gemara goes in and Gemara Ksubas in terms of when is the mitzvah onah to have relations with one's wife. Right? So a person's chayiv to be misamech his wife b'davar mitzvah through this, even if it's shalom bas onah, even if it's more, right? Even if it's more than just during the shas onah. So the Gemara answers Samach Avista, right? She was really expecting perhaps she might have become a Nida, and therefore it was during his man which he was supposed to be parish, he separated from her, and therefore there was no mitzvah at the time, and that's the reason why he's chayiv. See, hachi, afili v'tonami. So if that's the case, say the same case with the Yavama, right? So in the case of the Yavama, if it was close to Shas Vesta, where perhaps she was going to go ahead and see blood, then why is he patur in that case? So Yavimta bazis mina, ishla bazis mina. So his wife, right? He's right. His wife is very familiar with, right? He's lived with her for many years, so therefore he can go ahead and ask her. Since he didn't ask her, and he was boil her, and she was a nida, therefore he's chai. But in the case of Yavimta, right? He's unfamiliar with her, and since he's unfamiliar with her, it's very awkward. Therefore he wasn't expected to go ahead and ask her, and that's the reason why he is in such a case. Because he was doing a mitzvah. All right, maybe we'll stop here. I know, it's getting late, so tomorrow we'll have a little more time. But this, next to the beginning of Sugya, I don't think tomorrow's is as long. So tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem, we'll go ahead and hopefully we'll finish the parak tomorrow. Everyone have a wonderful day, and we'll see you guys later. Shkoyach, stay safe. All right, bye-bye.